Welcome members and guests to the September program for the IFMA Kansas City chapter. Today we're happy to have Dimensional Innovations giving us a tour of their facility. My name is Todd Heiser. I'm the president of the Kansas City chapter, IFMA. So first of all, I want everyone to know that we have some resources for COVID-19 on our website. Please, if you get a chance to check it out, please do. If you are an associate member, also check out our resource page. If you let us know, you can be listed as a provider for services to aid everyone in the industry during this difficult time. And just another reminder to members in good standing, you can have an opportunity to chair a committee. We're currently looking for a sponsorship chairperson, a career chairperson, and a scholarship chairperson. So if you're interested in any of those positions or any other volunteer positions for that matter, please let us know at info@ifma.org. And then I sure would like to thank our sponsors, our chapter sponsors, for all the great work that they do. HL Restoration, Image Flooring, Serve Pro, RUI, Construction and Disaster Services, Stanger, our friends over at John A. Marshall and Herman Miller, and we cannot forget our professional sponsors, Hallmark, Garmin, and Spring Venture Group. Don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call these folks. They're great. If you need services, don't hesitate to pick up the phone. And then, have you received our Monday morning memo? If you haven't, and you would like to, again, our email is info@ifma.org. It's a great resource, weekly updates for everything from education to programs to membership, industry-related events, anything happening at kind of the national level, you can find out there. Well, let's move on with the show here. If anyone has any questions or concerns, please email us at the chapter. Again, that email is info@ifma.org. So facilitators today, they all work at Dimensional Innovations. Like I said, they're going to be giving us a tour of their facility. Abby Hines is the corporate account director for Dimensional Innovations. She's responsible for leading DI's effort to transform how their clients, employees, and customers experience brands within a physical environment. Abby has a passion for bringing brands to life in a creative and impactful atmosphere. Joining us also was Drew Burst. He is the practice director for collegiate sports at Dimensional Innovations. Success has been driven by DEI's unique design-build approach to project delivery, master brand planning partnerships, and interactive technology experiences. Drew is the single point of accountability for all collegiate sports clients, and his main focus is to live and breathe college sports. He's been working in the sports facility industry for over 12 years. Also joining us from Dimensional Innovations is Michael. He's an account director for collegiate sports and higher education. And Eric, he's the client development representative for the corporate practice. So welcome to Dimensional Innovations. I will turn it over to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Todd. This is Abby Hines speaking. So I will get us started today. You should all be able to see a screen that Eric is sharing. If you can't, just put a note in the chat and we'll make sure to get that fixed. So on the topic of the chat, so the plan for today is that, of course, originally this was intended to be an in-person tour of all of you at our facility. So we are going to take you through a virtual tour of our space and where all of our experiences are designed and built within our team and within our corporate and collegiate practices. So as we go, feel free to throw out any questions you have or topics you want to touch on in that chat function that's down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then at the end, you can also come off of mute and ask any questions as far as anything you saw as far as our capabilities or the projects that we share. So just a couple housekeeping items, but we will get started with the tour if you want to go to the next page, Eric. Awesome. So just at a very high level, what DI is focused on is the experience side of both facilities in a built environment, of course, and then now that we have shifted to virtual engagement, and so if our clients, that experience is also translated to virtual environments as well. So, and we are part of the team of designing, building, and creating those immersive experiences through the design and technology capabilities of our team. I want to go to the next page. And speaking of our team, so this kind of highlights at a very high level the types of expertise and capabilities that we have in-house. As you can see, there's a lot of diverse types of roles. Everyone from a graphic designer to a fabricator to an engineer. And that's really the sweet spot of DI. That's okay. That's really the sweet spot of DI is our capability to take a project from beginning to end in that design method. So it really helps not only from efficiency and schedule, but also efficiency and budget as far as how we partner with our clients on projects. So we're, of course, headquartered in Kansas City. Our office is in Overland Park, and then we have a second location that's actually, as we speak, consolidating into one headquarters, but our second location is currently in Lenexa. And then we have satellite offices at a few different locations across the country. So we're a growing team, and of course, technology has been an area of rapid growth, especially in recent years. So we will start our tour. We'll pretend as though we're walking up the stairs to our design studio, and speaking to our design studio. So a little bit about this team is when you think about kind of the capabilities and what this team does, it's everything from when you think about design of signage to graphics to journey mapping of a facility, to even dimensional artistic elements. Those are the types of things that these folks are designing on kind of a day in, day out basis. So as you see on the bottom there, they are starting from that kind of discovery phase of a project of understanding what you as a client would be looking for and how you want to tell your story within a space, to conceptually sketching that out and bringing that to life. And then ultimately, it goes all the way through those phases of refining design, building that within our fabrication facility, and then ultimately installing and ensuring those experiences are kept up to date and fresh. So that phase 6 of service is a really important one for us, because we know that, your facilities are something that are a living, breathing entity within your organization, and your stories evolve, things sometimes break, we need to make sure that we're providing that support. So that's a key part of our process and our business as well. And then I will pass it on to the rest of my team for talking about technology. Mike, I think you're on mute, sorry.
Can you guys hear me now? Sorry.
There you go, yep.
Okay. So similar to our traditional graphic design studio, our technology studio is a team that can create concepts, but then ultimately they have kind of the back end support to program and code the interfaces which will be presented to your audience, employees, or visitors. And usually that content is projected up on some form of digital activation. That could be a touchscreen projector or integrated lighting. And these activations can ultimately be used and interacted via a touchscreen, live gesture, or responsive lighting. And then we also have the ability to develop apps. App development is something that we've done for a number of different sponsors within NFL stadiums, or even trade show exhibits or booths for corporate clients. And then we also can create video and animation. So if you have some type of lobby element that you would like to tell the history of the company and where you want to take your clients, we can create that brand video to help your prospective clients better understand where you can create value and maybe who are some of the folks that you've worked with before. This team is also responsible for servicing and updating this content. So when we invested in our technology team about 10 years ago, we knew that this was something that was going to help us better position our clients to keep their spaces refreshed and updated year over year. And so when we are installing and implementing this modern technology, we are able to train clients to help them better understand how to use the technology itself and how to service it if needed. So in refreshing content, we're able to do that, but we're also able to help the client, give them the keys that they're able to drive, and ultimately work with them year over year to keep the space fresh and updated. And okay. And then for kind of this next phase, our fabrication phase. So as Abby mentioned, we do have two facilities. One is in Overland Park, a second is in Lenexa. Our Overland Park location focuses more on specialty fabrication, so more signature sculptural elements. Our south facility does a fair amount of signage, wayfinding, traditional graphics, and printing of graphics. We have a number of different tools, from CNC routers to an LSAM, which Eric will talk about here in a little bit. But ultimately, this is where we take those design concepts, engineer them, figure out what materials would best support the budget that the client has outlined that we've helped them work towards, and then ultimately putting them together. And we're better designers because we're fabricators, and we're better fabricators because we're designers. So it kind of works hand in hand, that when you're creating this concept, you can work seamlessly with engineering and fabrication to figure out what's the best way to ultimately build this out while keeping the design intent intact. Next slide.
Cool. All right, well, I'm going to skip the LSAM slide and come back to it because I want to tell a little bit of a story of how DI works. So if you can imagine that you're in our building right now, you've worked your way through the lobby, up through design, through technology, and then back down onto our main shop floor where things are fabricated in a number of different ways. But whether it's in tech, design, or fabrication, if there's a major problem or a challenge that one of those departments is tasked with and doesn't necessarily have the time or resources to figure out, it'll go to our innovation lab. Brandon Wood started and leads our innovation lab with a team of about 4 or 5 people right now, and is really a brainstorming space within our facility that combines a number of different backgrounds, whether it be engineering and product design background, technology and software backgrounds, and also design. So a number of different projects that have come through DI that are our favorite ones to talk about have started in the lab. So If you've been to our facility ever or seen some of our work, one of our favorite projects to talk about is the Evel Knievel Museum in Topeka, Kansas, where we created a motorcycle experience that you sit on, and it's a full VR experience. And the lab was tasked to create this immersive experience in order to feel like you're actually on a motorcycle. So what they did was, before 360 cameras were created, they were brainstorming how to create this 360 experience, and actually put a bunch of GoPros on a motorcycle helmet, and had a daredevil recreate an Evel Knievel jump, and then put that into a VR helmet so people could experience it. In addition, another favorite example that we like to talk about at DI is what ended up being the LSAM. So a client, a professional football team, tasked us with creating a huge torch, essentially, and that was about it. So you can see this is a mock-up of the design, and he left it open to us on how we wanted to design it. So after going to the lab to think about traditional fabrication methods, whether that be like traditional aluminum or steel fabrication, they determined that it was going to be way too expensive and also way too difficult to make it flush, given the size of it and the curvature of the torch itself. So Brandon, along with a few other people in the lab, have been experimenting and prototyping with small 3D printing applications, so the ones that you typically see on top of a desk. And they would explain it much more eloquently than me, but essentially they had the idea of, what if we just bought a giant 3D printer and created it that way? And after some prototyping and some research, they ended up purchasing the LSAM to create it, which is what we have here. So the LSAM, which stands for Large Scale Additive Manufacturing, is one of about 10 of these in use within the US, and it's really the only one being used for architectural purposes. And what that means, and for us, is that we have a lot of creativity from a design perspective to create shapes and structures that weren't really possible before. So you'll see very soon, or Mike, am I allowed to, is that cat out of the bag? Can I talk about the project now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So the Raider Stadium, you'll see a huge printed torch right here at DI. It's one of the largest 3D printed structures in the world. Came out of the innovation lab and was created on this LSAM printer. And now it's open for use in tons of different creative ways in the architectural industry. So it's super exciting, and definitely something that, if you have the opportunity to come visit us in person, it would be worthwhile doing. And that's about all I have on my end. I'll throw it back to the team to talk about some case studies and how we incorporate all this stuff to actually make cool environments within facilities. Drew, do you want to touch on this?
Yeah, happy to, guys. Thank you again. I apologize to all. Can't see my photo. I'm driving back from beautiful Manhattan, Kansas. So, but I'm pulled over now, so we're good. So our process, I mean, the good news is, the folks here on the call have really touched on our process. This just sort of shows you how it truly looks. And the key is, the reason it's a circle, right, is the idea is most of our clients are repeat clients. So really it's about, initially when we see the discovery, right, initially we want to learn everything we can about our clients, mine those little stories that make them unique, and then begin the process of telling those stories throughout a facility. And then, right, ideally we do more work with that client, and we don't have to do as much up front on the discovery side. We really know enough about them to kind of further that process. But on the right-hand side, right, you see the stages of our process, which is really further refinement of ideas. We start out, with a broad brush and narrow in on it. But perhaps more specifically and more unique to us is the far right side of this screen, which shows you that we're actually able to design to a budget from very early on. So, even when an idea is just a simple sketch, we actually, because of our internal resources, our internal capabilities, right, we're actually able to give real pricing to the process. So the idea that we can bring the best design to the table, but at the same time, the best knowledge about how those designs come to life and therefore how much they cost, to bring those to the table together is really kind of unheard of and outstanding. Something that gives us a big competitive edge over our clients or over our competitors. So and all of that is the backing of all the knowledge that exists inside our company, because we make our own designs. We're able to do this in a way no one else can. Sorry, I don't know who's next on here, but that's the rundown of us.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew.
Yeah.
So yeah, jumping into a few projects that you can get a sense of, now that you've kind of seen where all of these experiences are designed and built. I think looking at some final product is always a helpful piece of context. So what you're looking at here, and I will give context overall, all the case studies are Kansas based, since this is of course the Kansas City chapter of IFMA, but that said, we work on projects all across the nation. So we aren't necessarily geographically limited, but all the projects you'll see today are in Kansas City or surrounding towns. So this is a corporate facility for Dairy Farmers America. I think some people on this call might have actually been to this space. In this instance, really the story that this client was looking to tell is, of course, the story of milk. So for them, it's pretty straightforward. Being dairy farmers, they really wanted to find a way to artistically bring that story to life throughout their facility. So HOK was the architect on this project. So they focused on what is the experience of the building as a whole. And then we partnered with HOK and the DFA client to focus on what are those experiences and moments in areas like their lobby and their conference rooms and community areas that we can articulate that story in a really artistic way. So some of these images you're seeing here are representations of how our design team brought that to life. So they're in that 2-story lobby right when you enter the space. This is this hand sculpted cascading milk wall, is I would say how we like to call it. And the intent really here is just to kind of make this wow factor of an art piece that you can see throughout multiple points through the building, not just in the lobby. There's a lot of glass integrated into this facility, so it has great viewing access through multiple points. And then some of these other images are different ways that we brought that milk story to life, like I mentioned, in conference rooms and in common areas of, thinking about cheese graters and bubbling milk and milk jugs. So they wanted it to be a subtle articulation of milk, but something that came off very artistic and also kind of flowed well with the existing architecture that HOK worked on. And some of you might be familiar with this space. So this is the new J. Rieger and Company distillery. I suppose it's not probably very new at this point, but J. Rieger, if you aren't familiar, has a really long, rich history in Kansas City. And when Andy Rieger embarked on creating this distillery experience, he really wanted to find a way to bring that story to life and help the community understand exactly what that history is all about and why it's important to Kansas City and why it's important to them as a company and a brand. So this is, of course, a distillery environment, but we find that this is translated quite a bit to, collegiate environments and corporate environments of wanting to tell the history of their organizations as well. So this is kind of an exhibit museum type experience when you go to the distillery, but really the intent is to help educate visitors on the brand and who they are, so that they have a kind of a deeper connection as they're experiencing the different distillery related experiences that you would have when visiting. And then speaking to the technology side. So the last two examples you saw, of course, are more artistic and kind of fabricated versions of how our designs can come to life. And this instance you're seeing here is much more technology driven. So in this instance, this client was, the intent of this space is a customer facing audience for them. So it's much more of a selling and relationship building environment for their business, rather than being, you know, necessarily an employee focused space. So they have an entire building dedicated within their corporate campus to this client facing engagement. And DI's scope within that building is focused on the areas that really bring the story to life. There's lots of different ways that this company services their clients. So technology was a really smart solution for them as a way to be able to update that content, keep it fresh, keep it customized to their customer audience. And over time, as their business evolves, they're able to easily update that content as well accordingly. So you'll see that, you know, we brought their brand story to life and talked about the type of software they provide in many different ways here. So I think the most important part is that ultimately when we went through that discovery phase with them, their main story to tell, as you'll see in multiple points in these pictures, was innovation in motion. And we wanted to bring that story to life in multiple ways. So it's not only shown in kind of these more static type graphic environments and executions, but also in the technology. The two images you see there on the bottom of the screen, they wanted to use the technology in a way that helps further amplify that story. So rather than just having technology for the cool sake of technology, it was used as both in the content in the video that is shown within this room, but also the technology hardware wraps underneath you as you walk into the space so that you can actually feel in a very multi-sensory way that feeling of innovation motion as you walk through and get an introduction to who the company is.
Real quick, how much time do we have left, Ash?
Well, one of the things that we want to do is recognize Emergency Preparedness Month. So I would say if around 12:30.
Oh, okay, perfect. Didn't know if you wanted me to wrap up quickly. That's plenty of time. All right.
Nope, that's okay. We just wanted to make sure that Daryl had an opportunity to talk. So we'll schedule him around the 12:30 timeframe, and then we can open it all up for questions. Maybe somebody would even have an Evergy question that they would want to pose at the end as well.
Yeah, sounds good. Drew,
Okay,
Mike,
great.
good segue to your guys' world of collegiate sports.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Mike, you can chime in as well, but I'm happy to be leaving there. So this is a good example of at K-State, we've actually done multiple projects for both athletics and then academics. It's a really good example for us of the long-term partnerships we have with brands. And Mike, do you want to speak to this project specifically? I could certainly speak to the partnership, but this would be our fifth or sixth project with K-State in general. And Mike, you want to go through the details? Are you muted? Did you remember to hit mute?
Can you guys hear me?
There he is.
Okay, sorry. I'm dialed in on my phone, but I'm also on my computer. So this was the College of Engineering that we were able to work on. This was constructed about 5 or 6 years ago, and in their scope of work, the architect had outlined some type of interactive touchscreen that visitors and current students could walk up to and learn more about not only the history of the college, but some of the current offerings that it provides. So visitors are able to walk up to the screen, learn about different clubs that they can get involved in within the college, and then also learn about the number of different majors that are within the college. So this is a great welcoming space. And, you know, if you are having some sort of donor event or hosting the next class that will be entering the school, you're able to update the content within this touch screen to make sure that it's customized and that group feels welcome. So really this is kind of all about how you can help educate your audience, prospective students, donors in a unique and very tech forward capacity. Another example. And then KU. So we've also had the opportunity to work both with athletics and different buildings on the higher education side of campus. Ginsler, I believe, was the architect for the School of Business here, Capitol Federal Hall. We were responsible for fabricating and installing, in addition to design assisting, some of their unique donor activation and recognition systems throughout the building. So you can see this donor wall here with the wood paneling on the top right. We also have some unique sayings that are said throughout the college. Really what we want to do is instill a sense of pride, recognize your key donors, and make the space feel inspiring and ultimately get the kid or prospective student to commit to the school.
Well, that wraps up some of the case studies. We have, it sounds like, plenty of time for questions, so we can structure that however you would like, Ash, but we're happy to go back and cover some case studies in more detail or answer questions more broadly.
Yeah, do any of our members have any questions that they would like to ask them?
I'll ask, this is Becky Balhars, is there particular materials, plastic or aluminum or what that you work with, or does it all depend on the installation?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Becky. No, I would say that it is 100% dependent on the project and the scope type. Essentially, we select materials based on factors such as budget of the client, what exactly we are fabricating can often drive the material selections. And I would say budget is a big factor too. When you think about hard coated aluminum versus steel, there's a big cost difference there. So that can sometimes be a driving factor.
There's a question here.
And I just add,
Drew, you're cutting out there.
Not super clear, Drew.
While he works on that, there was also a question from Melanie. Has COVID inspired different technologies to replace touchscreens?
Yeah, Melanie, great question.
It's a great question.
A couple different answers to that. Sorry, Drew, I don't think your audio is working. I'm just letting you know. But Melanie, a couple different ways we would answer that question. Sorry. Is one being when you're thinking about in a facility environment, like Mike mentioned, gesture-based technology is one way to kind of solve for that. And then also especially in the corporate environment, we've found clients can use things like pens, like touch pens. It can serve as, a little takeaway item for the client. And then it also can serve as a way so that people aren't interacting with the screen and having kind of those infection related challenges. Another way we've looked at it too is actually with a lot of clients of ours going 100% virtual. As I've mentioned really early on, earlier today, we're creating kind of virtual environments and experiences for our clients as well. So using our technology capabilities to transfer this storytelling to a virtual experience.
Yeah, I would elaborate. Rich asks, are you working on any projects that are a result of the coronavirus, i.e. innovative office space designs, additional collaboration spaces, increased hoteling spaces? And I'll maybe open with that and Abby, let you elaborate. So I think our biggest challenge and what we're working to solve is, what does a hybrid approach to the workplace look like going forward? And that maybe some people will be attending meetings in person, but then the other half of attendees will be attending virtually. And how do we still deliver an effective meeting and a rememberable and remarkable experience when that is the new normal in corporate office spaces? So Abby, I might let you elaborate a little bit more on how we're solving that.
Yeah, so I mean, what we've seen in conversation with our clients, as well as new companies that we've been talking to since the pandemic began, is that this has kind of ignited this overall shift in how companies are looking at the use of real estate. Not only use of real estate, but also their engagement with their customers or audiences. And so that has, kind of like I mentioned, caused this shift in how we look at what are different ways other than, you know, the physical space that we could engage with that audience. And that has kind of shifted us into the direction of creating these virtual experiences that can serve as, you know, tours of a collegiate campus, as an example, or there can be these immersive and dynamic client presentations that are merging, you know, storytelling content with the conferencing experience of, you know, say a Zoom or something like that. So there's different ways that we're particularly using our technology capabilities as a result of COVID.
Going back, it looks like we missed a question from Amy. What's your favorite or most interesting project?
That is, I mean, I will let everyone speak to that, but because we probably all have a different answer, but that's a really hard question to answer. I would say I'm going to answer that in two ways. One, I think our most, or at least my most favorite or most interesting project would be more so related to the result that it creates for a client. I think there's almost nothing more satisfying than hearing feedback from our clients' customers on the impact that the experience we created had on them or had on their business. There's a specific client we work with in the healthcare insurance industry that built a customer experience center with us. And, you know, on the first day of opening that experience center, they had one of their top clients into the space, and it helped accelerate, you know, deals with their business. And so when we hear that type of success and feedback, it's ultimately what brings us to work and ultimately what we're trying to provide our clients. So.
Yeah, I'll go real quick. I work under Abby in the corporate practice, so Abby, you may not want to listen to this, but I love the sports work that we've done. Some of the locker rooms and athletic facilities I think are super cool. Both professional sports stadiums and some of the college work we've done are just a lot of fun to see.
Personally, for me, I was able to meet DI. I previously worked for the Chiefs, and I met DI while they were doing a partnership activation build out for Community America Credit Union. They had recently reached an agreement with the Chiefs to be the official Chiefs checking partner. And if you've ever been to those gated ramps at Arrowhead Stadium, the Community America activation was one that I was kind of able to see from beginning to end. So personally for me, that's one of my favorites, especially when you're able to see it light up on Sunday Night Football.
Awesome. We have another question from Teresa with Garmin. When kicking off a project, do you encourage the client to think big, or do you have them take a more conservative approach and build and expand on the ideas? Or is it based on budget to what approach you might take?
Thanks, Teresa. That's a good question. So this goes back a little bit to the process that we take with clients. And I would say we typically have a path A versus path B of budgets. And that leads to the idea too of thinking big or thinking conservatively. So path A is a client says, hey, I'm going through a renovation, or I'm building a new building within our campus. I have X amount of budget to spend on this type of scope that we're looking to do for our experience. Let's design and build to that. And that is 100% a way that we work. We often say budgets give way to creativity, because it helps put a framework around it, which is always helpful. But like we showed in the process slide earlier, our path B to budgets is also, a client says they know they want this type of experience within their building. That could be for a myriad of different reasons, but once we understand exactly what they're looking for, then we can go through our process. And as we start to design ideas, we can start to give birth to what those budgets would look like accordingly. So because we have a lot of expansive capabilities, I always do like to encourage clients to think big. But also we don't want to ever show a client something that they ultimately can't afford. So it can go both ways. And so it really is dependent on kind of the experience you're looking for, and also the liberty of investment that you have within your organization.
It looks like we have time for one or two more questions. Does anybody have anything else they would like to ask? You can post it in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question.
I just want to say thank you for presenting. It was neat to not only get a virtual tour of your space at DI, which I have seen and it is amazing, but also to get virtual tours of some other really neat places. So thank you guys, really great presentation. And this is Amy Bozen.
You bet. Thanks, Amy.
The large printer that you have, I was going to type this in. I thought I'd go ahead and unmute. The large printer that you have, what was the first project that you printed something large scale on that? And what was the Dairy Farmers of America? What's the milk? What's the core? What is that made of? What is a lot of that materiality?
I can answer the Dairy Farmers of America, and then I'll let our sports team talk to the LCM question. As far as Dairy Farmers of America, that is actually a hard-coated styrofoam is what that was originally made out of. So that was made within our art department. And that team, actually very contrary to the LSAM, the LSAM is about very detailed, rigid, exact, and precise manufacturing, versus our art department is more about kind of like the free-form organic type of fabrication methods. And so we actually use styrofoam quite a bit as that inner core of the element. And then we use a coating method to create the exterior. When you walk up to that, it definitely, you can't push through it or anything like that. It doesn't feel like styrofoam in that sense, but that's the inner core of that element.
It looks like fiberglass. And so did you have the printer before that, and you said you probably wouldn't have used the printer on something like that was probably the best materiality to use?
We didn't have the printer at the time of that project. However, I would say we still would most likely in that instance use our art department, because the intent of that experience is that they really wanted that organic feel to it. They wanted it to feel more like free-flowing milk. And often, our fabrication method, just like the material question earlier, our fabrication method could often be determined by budget too. Sometimes the man hours of art department can be more costly than something like 3D printing, but that ultimately depends on exactly what we're creating. So.
And then for the torch, to answer that question, we purchased the LSAM. There were a few restrictions, specifically weight-wise, within the stadium, that it was making it very difficult to figure out what type of material we could use to put the torch structure in. So the Innovation Lab did some research on materials that can be used to produce structural elements like the torch. And ultimately what we came up with was a polycarbonate plastic. So they're small pellets, almost like you would see under a field turf, which actually are printed from the machine. So we ultimately printed, I don't know the exact number, but quite a few different panels, and then put the panels together at our facility, stack them, and ship them out to Las Vegas. So it's actually a plastic, and the main reason for using that material is, one, it's actually fairly durable. I think, you know, plastic has, usually you think of plastic as rather cheap, but this type of plastic itself was very durable, and it was also lightweight, so it was able to fit within the weight restrictions of the area that we were building the torch into. So.
And Teresa, another part to answer that question too is that is actually the only project that we've done on the LSAM. That project took quite a long time to build. So when we bought that, it started out with that torch project, and then now that that is done, it will move on to some other work. But at this point, that is all we've printed there.
Cool. Well, we can throw it back to you guys. Seems like it's a good time to switch back to you.
Yeah. Daryl, we have Daryl here with Evergy. And Daryl, if you want to take it over, we wanted to schedule a few minutes to acknowledge that September is Emergency Preparedness Month. So Daryl, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us today.
All right, well, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Good, okay. Well, my name is Daryl Wingard. I am a security investigator for Evergy. Background is not at all in facilities or facilities management or building design or anything like that. My background's in law enforcement with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, who's unfortunately been in the news the last couple of days with a couple of deputies shot out there. And then I have 14 years with them, and then going on almost 20 years now in private security since my time with LA County. And so what I wanted to present today is just something to share a little bit about what we've done in the past in terms of planning for major security events. Some of this does involve facilities, obviously. We work pretty closely with facilities when we are planning events that are in our facilities. Sometimes we have events that are not planned in our facilities. And so we'll just take a look at that. Let me try to share my screen here. This one here, share. All right, can you guys all see that okay?
Yes.
The PowerPoint, okay. So historically, Evergy has conducted security planning operations for three types of events that are on a fairly major scale. Significant community events like you're probably all familiar with the Plaza lighting ceremony that happens every year. We play a little role in that we plan security for the main headquarters for Evergy there. Kansas City Police Department plays the major role there in planning for the overall security of the plaza. But then we in security have a role in doing security for the Brio restaurant where the headquarters is, and right there by the main stage for the plaza lighting event. We do various operations plans, security operations plans for company meetings like our annual shareholder meeting, various town hall meetings, and these have somewhat of a smaller public involvement. Mainly our goal there is to plan security for an orderly meeting and protection for our company representatives. These sometimes take place in our own facilities, and so we work pretty closely with facilities, our facilities department on that. And then other times they take place in publicly rented events. For example, one that I'll mention a little later, back in 2012, took place down on the plaza in a library meeting room down there. And then the one I'll spend the most time on today, just explaining a little bit of what we did, was the 2012 MLB All-Star Game. The security operations planning that we did for that. That's probably the most interesting. Obviously, a very large public involvement, and our security planning there would be mainly focused on the protection of our critical infrastructure, meaning we don't want the lights to go out during the All-Star Game or during the Home Run Derby or those types of things. And there were actually 2 venues during the All-Star Game that we worked to protect, and that one would be the power and the infrastructure for Kauffman Stadium in that area, and then another one would be for Bartle Hall downtown, where there were daily activities during the 3 days of the All-Star festivities at Bartle Hall. So I'll just walk through the next 3 slides on kind of the 3 phases of our planning for that. No lovely pictures or anything fancy here, just boring words, but it's good things for us all to think through. And I was going to ask earlier, I didn't get my question in, but when you guys are planning the designs for these clients that you have, how often do you find that security professionals or the security department at these organizations, these clients of yours, are being consulted or are playing a role in the design process? Is that common, or is it just business, the standard? Or is that not happening too often?
Yeah, this is Abby. I can speak to that on the corporate side. I would say those teams are frequently involved. Security has been even more so involved, I would say, especially in this virtual world. There's been a lot of conversation about creating these experiences in a secure environment as it relates to virtual engagement. But as far as built spaces, that's all often, it kind of depends on the audience of the space that we're designing. But that's often a way that we factor in, or something that we factor in when we're thinking about the journey of an experience and how we design accordingly.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, speaking from a security perspective, there's nothing more frustrating than being handed a building to secure and it wasn't designed and thought through from a security perspective, and it can make things very difficult. Sort of, you've heard of the term CPTED, the crime prevention through environmental design. Those are just principles that help us all design things and build things together that can actually facilitate better security and that sort of thing. So a little bit of a side note there, but there's one of the initial phase of the planning for the MLB All-Star Game was just to communicate and coordinate with law enforcement. We regularly receive briefings from FBI, the Kansas City Terrorist Early Warning Center, which has since been renamed as the Kansas City Regional Fusion Center, and it's a cooperative between law enforcement agencies that keeps information out there. And then the Missouri Information Analysis Center, we got a detailed briefing from them about 4 weeks in advance of the All-Star Game, which would just tell us if there's any intelligence that's out there that indicates that there might be some kind of concern or might be some kind of threat or things that we would need to be concerned about. In this case, there were none. It was a pretty clean analysis. There were no known threats of things that are upcoming. But we'll be looking on Facebook and we'll be checking things like that just to see if there's any kind of buzz out there in terms of just terrorist activities, either domestic or whatever. You know, in the years since 9/11, we've all been much more focused on that, and big events where you have thousands and thousands of people centered in one place is just catches everybody's attention. So we would do the same thing again about a week prior to the event. We would recontact some of these agencies and ask them if they've learned anything new, because they don't send out that briefing, the detailed briefing, repeatedly. It's a one-time deal. So then we would recontact them, and then again a day or so before, we would also share with Kansas City Police Department what some of our measures were going to be and what areas we were seeking to protect. In this case, there's one critical substation that actually feeds the sports complex there at Arrowhead and Kauffman Stadium. That obviously, if somebody were going to do an act of sabotage, that would be the substation that they would probably attack. So we would share that information with law enforcement and then ask law enforcement if they had received any additional intelligence regarding any kind of troubles. And we've had a really good relationship with the Kansas City Police Department and these other agencies over the years, so we have pretty good communication there. So the second aspect of our planning would actually be physical preparations. The one substation that I mentioned, we would inspect that substation, obviously not security, but the distribution systems operations folks and the substation personnel would inspect it. We would actually photograph it from several different angles just to establish a baseline appearance of what the substation looks like a week prior to the event. We actually worked with our substations folks and our transmission folks to actually tack weld down the lids to some manhole covers that have an underground line in them that feeds the sports complex. Not the ones right in the parking lot where there's going to be lots of people and police officers around, but through a wooded section that goes between there, we would actually have them tack weld those down, and we would physically walk. I remember because it was very hot in late June, early July, walking that whole length of transmission line that's underground to, number one, make sure those things were tack welded down, that there weren't any kind of evidence of pre-planning like staging of equipment or staging of materials to breach those manhole covers and that sort of thing. And we would check with our DSO and transmission folks to make sure they were conducting inspections of the substation as well, and just stay in regular communication there. With our company, that's not, the substations are not something that are handled by facilities so much as they're handled by the substations group. And so this is an instance where we didn't have our own facilities department involved as much, but it's mainly the substation and transmission departments. So that we confirm that our own security systems are up and working, cameras and any alarm systems that we had in that particular substation. Do, again, similar thing 2 days prior, we would check with DSO and TCC to make sure they didn't have any issues, everything was working fine, and then we would be conducting ongoing security systems checks. And then a day prior also, we would take those photographs that we had taken earlier, and we would compare them physically by looking at the photograph and looking at the substation from the same angle to see if there was any kind of change, any kind of new equipment that maybe is sitting there that we wouldn't necessarily notice unless we had that previous photograph to compare to. So, and then a final security systems check, you know, the day before, night before, morning of the event. So then the third aspect that we do is actually physically securing these assets prior to and during the event. We would stage security officers there. We'd schedule this a week out, and then we'd confirm it a couple days prior. And with the All-Star game being a 3-day event, we would stage our own security officers at that substation overnight the night before until we had substations personnel there, and they would camp there all day long in case anything went wrong. They'd be right on site to deal with it. And they would stay throughout the event until that evening's festivities were over. And then we would replace them with security officers overnight again to make sure that critical asset was not only under camera and alarm monitoring, but under actually people on site actually watching to make sure it was well secured for that evening. And we did this through the event, through the 3 days of the All-Star Game festivities. And as you know, since then, we've had 2 World Series in Kansas City. We had 2014 and 2015. We had a couple of playoffs games for the Chiefs this last year when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. And so we had this template that we built back in 2012 that we then were able to use for all of these additional major sporting events, centering around the same exact critical infrastructure that we were seeking to protect for that. So some of the things that I would just go over at the end here in terms of lessons learned and just principles that we all probably think about, but more so in the security world, but facilities and security work together a lot. One is hope for the best, but plan for the worst. We always hope nothing will happen, but we need to plan in case that one thing does happen. And we had two interesting events in 2012 that show both sides of that. We planned pretty extensively for the All-Star game, and absolutely nothing happened. We had no advance indications that anything was going to happen. It went smoothly, it went peacefully, but we were ready in case something did happen. Just about a month or two, actually 2 months prior to that, we had one of our annual shareholder meetings, which is a very important annual meeting for the company. It's when the board of directors gathers, and they have a legally required meeting every year that has to be completed. They have to take certain measures and have certain votes and have certain things that are done for a annual requirement with the Missouri Public Service Commission. And that took place at a library down on the plaza. And we had lots of advance notice in this particular case that there was going to be trouble. We weren't in our own facility. We were at a rented facility down on the plaza. But so we did a lot of checking of the facility and getting to know the layout of the facility. And we had, if you recall, that was during the time when the Occupy Wall Street movement was pretty big, and there were lots of people who were very opposed to big corporations and businesses. And we had word that there was going to be a group of people who actually bought at least one share so they could be called shareholders and thus be let into the meeting, and they were going to try to disrupt our meeting. So we worked with KCPD. We hired off-duty law enforcement officers to be there with us. And sure enough, they tried during this meeting. We had about 15 or 20 folks in the meeting that had 3 or 4 disruptions where they would all stand up together and try to shout everybody down and try to get us to cancel the meeting. And that was their goal, was to shut down the meeting. But because of our pre-planning, we had the officers ready and we had a plan ready, and we were able to usher all of these people out in groups as they would stand up. And so therefore, kind of the worst case scenario happened, that these people really did try to shut down our meeting. So hope for the best, but plan for the worst, and then you'll be ready whichever happens. I put down there, seek input from all stakeholders, not just security and law enforcement. It's very important that security works with facilities, works with media relations. We work in our company, we have a lot of different departments that we work together with in planning these kinds of events. Facilities especially, I would say, would be the closest one that we work with, because oftentimes they're the ones that are helping us with certain aspects of the actual facility, when things are going to happen, where they're going to happen, how things are going to be set up, and that sort of thing. So we try to get input from all of them, keep everybody in the loop in terms of the planning for these kinds of events, and then we try to keep constant and clear communication both during the planning and during the actual execution of the event. So keep people on phone contact and sometimes handheld radio contact and that sort of thing. And that would lead me to the next point, which is to test and retest your critical technology, and even then have a worst case scenario backup plan. Your radios could fail, some kind of system could fail. If it's a critical communication system, you know, probably the worst case scenario is all the phone systems go down. Even then, you know, we've learned that texts will sometimes go through when phone calls won't go through. Even if you have an AT&T outage in a particular area, sometimes texts will work when phone calls won't. So we just have a plan like that to make sure we're going to be able to fall back on something even if the worst case scenario happens. And then we always try to conduct an after action review for these things. After the event is over, we sit down with everybody who played a role in the security planning, including facilities and whatever other agencies, and we just look at how it went. We try to be honest and identify gaps in our planning or mistakes or oversights, or this went wrong and how can we mitigate that next time. We make course corrections for the next event, and we try to save our operations plans, and then we can use those as a template for the next time with any necessary modifications. We didn't do the exact same thing in the 2014 and 15 All-Star game that we did. There were some minor tweaks to our plan in terms of the scheduling of security and things like that. For the 2014 and 15 All-Star games, World Series games, as there were for the All-Star game, and same thing for the Chiefs games. So that's kind of a little bit of a quick bird's eye view of what we do. for major events. And I'd be happy if anybody has any questions about that from your group, answer them as best I could. But other than that, that's all I've got.
Does
Are there any
anybody
questions?
Does
Go
anybody
ahead.
have any questions for Daryl? Feel free to post them in the chat box or unmute yourself.
This is Becky. I just want to say, I didn't really have any questions because this is part of what we do all the time. But he's in line with what we as the federal government, FEMA, do for every disaster response and recovery. You know, you learn from it, you plan worst case, hope for the best, and all that. So it was interesting to see what others do. And plus, as a sports fan, it's interesting to know that we're covered for our big events.
Yeah.
I felt the same way, Becky. I didn't realize that all of this was going on behind the scenes. Thank you for keeping us safe.
Well, thank you for letting me share with you. And if there's no other questions, I'll remove my shared screen here.
It looks like Zach had a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had a quick question. You know, I'm in a different context, but have some similar issues. And I was curious what kind of framework you all use for assessing and prioritizing risks. Sometimes, you know, you have risks in a lot of different directions. And I was curious if you all had a way that you determined what to start with and where to prioritize resources.
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, that reminds me of the hiring of the off-duty law enforcement officers for that shareholders meeting back in 2012. I think we hired 8 off-duty law enforcement officers with Kansas City Police for that one because we had all that information. And what that turned into was us, for the next few years, even though we moved from that location back to our own facility at 1KC Place downtown, we still were hiring large numbers of off-duty law enforcement officers because we were leery of the same thing happening again. Over time, we came to the conclusion, just because nothing was happening at these other meetings, we didn't have the advanced intelligence that there was going to be problems and that sort of thing. So we were able to reduce the resource allocation there and save some money by getting down to where we were only hiring 2 or 3 officers, and then I think just 1 or 2 the last time. So as far as a template for figuring that out, I would say it just goes in our organization anyway. It's more just something that we get the heads together and discuss and try to come up with a consensus on what we need. I don't think I could say there's any kind of statistical analysis really. If we're not getting the feedback that there's problems inherent in the event or something like that, we just put everybody's heads together and try to think through what could happen and what could be needed and make our decisions that way. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Yeah, thanks.
I guess the point of the first part of what I said there would be to not be afraid to reduce resources if it's really reasonable to do so. Just because you did something once at a heightened level because there was a known risk doesn't mean that has to be the standard going forward for every other event. Any other questions?
I don't think we have any other questions, but I think that Becky had something that she wanted to talk about in regards to FEMA's website for Preparedness Month. So Becky, go ahead.
Thanks, Ash. You guys all know, at least many of you do, I've been at FEMA for about 7, almost 8 years now, and they have a website, ready.gov, ready.gov. And it is got a lot of extensive information about preparedness. It's got over 30 different types of disasters and emergencies. It's got some coronavirus information that actually goes to another website. It can help you build a plan and make a plan and build a kit, what you should keep in that kit. Emergency alerts, there's a way for you to sign up for emergency alerts in your area. There's also information for businesses, all sorts of things on that. And it's also done in about 24 languages, so feel free to pass it on. This is public information that's readily available for anybody. And so I just want to put a plug in for that. You can do this for your home. There's a special area for kids. If you have kids that like making plans and being prepared, there's a whole section there for kids, whether they're teens or tweens and in between. Didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it worked out well. So anyway, I just always, anytime we talk national preparedness, I want us to be ready, both personally and business-wise. So feel free to use that information and share it. Again, that's ready.gov. So I'll take any questions, but I don't know. Anyway, if someone has them, but I just wanted to get that in there. Thank you, Ash.
Of course, we do have about a little more than 15 minutes left for this scheduled meeting. If anybody has anything else that they want to talk about in regards to Preparedness Month, or if they have a question for Becky or Daryl, I see some representatives from DI are still with us, so now's a great opportunity to do that.
I have a question for DI. This is sort of a selfish question, but maybe it'll be relevant for everyone else.
I love it, Zach.
Putting in a projection and display system in our sanctuary. Is that something that you all have any experience with? And who would I talk to about designing and building out something like that?
Yeah, Zach, who do you work for? Just as
well, St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Brookside.
Oh, okay. Yeah, short answer is yes. I would say we do have experience with it, and I'd be happy to kind of talk offline as far as exactly what you're looking to do. But I would, it kind of depends on what you're looking for. Is typically part of kind of it's one component of a larger facility type project. So if Ash has my information, if you would like to reach out, she could absolutely put us in touch. So.
Definitely, Zach. I'll send that over to you right now.
Thanks. Sorry, that was selfish.
Are you kidding? I love your participation, Zach. You're awesome. Thank you for asking. Does anybody else, even if it's for selfish reasons, have a question that they want to ask Abby? Or Eric, he's still on. Anybody? I feel like saying Bueller. Bueller. All right, well, if there isn't any more questions, we'll probably go ahead and wrap up today's meeting. If you guys think of anything after the meeting, like I usually do, please feel free to send me an email or Teresa an email, and we can get you whatever contact information that you need. One last chance for questions, and then we're going to end the meeting. All right, it was really good to see all of you. Take care. You know how to get in touch with us if you need us. All right, we'll see you all soon.
Thank you guys. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much.